السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. مبادئ حرية التعبير والحرية الأكاديمية كلها باتت اليوم تحت مقصلة اللوبي الإسرائيلي المسيطر بنفوذه في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بجميع مرافقها. الموت البطيء للحرية الأكاديمية في جامعة إلينوي من الداخل. معكم زينب الصفار، تابعونا. يحظر على الكونغرس الأمريكي تشريع أي قانون يؤدي إلى تعطيل حرية الكلام أو النشر الصحفي أو حق الناس في إقامة تجمعات سلمية. هذا هو التعديل الأول من وثيقة الحقوق التي تجمع التعديلات العشرة الأولى لدستور الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. اقترح الكونغرس وثيقة الحقوق هذه في 25 من أيلول سبتمبر عام 1771 وأقرت في 15 من كانون الأول ديسمبر عام 1791 بمصادقة الهيئات التشريعية لمختلف الولايات وفقا للمادة 5 من الدستور الأساسي. تحدد التعديلات العشرة الأولى للدستور الأمريكي الحقوق والامتيازات والحريات التي لابد للحكومة الفيدرالية أن تحترمها، بيد أنه على الرغم من هذه الوثيقة الواضحة والتي صيغت تعديلاتها بهدف حماية الحريات الفردية، ظلت الحريات الأكاديمية وحرية التعبير في أمريكا منذ ذاك تتلقى طعنة تلو أخرى. في الأمس القريب انتشرت أنباء عن هجمات على الحريات الأكاديمية، كثير منها بحسب المراقبين بسبب جهود عدائية قام بها أفراد ومنظمات من أجل إسكات أولئك الأكاديميين الذين يعتبرونهم أعداء لإسرائيل. هذه الحالة لترهيب الأكاديميين الذين ينتقدون إسرائيل ليست بجديدة، إذ إن منظمة تطلق على نفسها اسم أمتشا وتزعم أنها تعمل من أجل حماية الطلاب اليهود وضعت قائمة بأسماء أكثر من 200 أستاذ جامعي يؤيدون مقاطعة إسرائيل اعتبرتهم معادين للسامية، وطلبت من الطلاب اليهود الامتناع عن حضور فصولهم الدراسية. في عام 2002 أسس المؤلف الأمريكي دانيال بايبس منظمة كامبس واتش أي مراقب الحرم الجامعي، ونشر عبر موقعها على الإنترنت أسماء أكاديميين معظمهم يعملون في مجال دراسات الشرق الأوسط اتهمهم بأنهم مدافعون عن التفجيرات الانتحارية والإسلام المجاهد. وشجع بايبس الطلاب المؤيدين لإسرائيل على أن يتعقبوا مثل هؤلاء الأساتذة ويجعلوهم يدركون أنهم تحت المراقبة. الباحث الأمريكي من أصول عربية والخبير في الدراسات الأمريكية الهندية البروفيسور ستيفين سلايطة هو آخر ضحايا استهداف الحريات الأكاديمية وخنقها. كيف يصف الظلم الذي لحق به جراء تغريدات خلال العدوان الإسرائيلي على غزة في الصيف الماضي وأدت إلى خسارته وظيفته في جامعة إلينوي؟ وما الدافع لكل تلك المعاملة غير المهنية؟ وهل بات من المتعذر اليوم أن نفصل بين التعبير عن آراء شخصية في شبكات التواصل الاجتماعي وبين التصريحات العامة والرسمية؟ وماذا يقول في أكبر إعدام جماعي أمرت به الحكومة الأمريكية ضد 38 من الأميركيين الأصليين عام 1862؟ Arab-American scholar and professor of American Indian Studies from Washington, D.C., Dr. Stephen Salaita, welcome to The Inside.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome, sir. Well, Dr. Salaita, you primarily work on indigenous studies, and you were offered tenure as professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Yet last fall, the job was revoked by the university. Your published work has been attacked. Pro-Israel politicians pressured Brooklyn College to cancel your November 22nd talk at the school. You are without a job and with no health insurance. What's all this about? What's going on? And why all this?
Mostly has to do with my criticism of Israel's operations in Gaza during Protective Edge this last summer. I strongly criticized the Israeli government. I strongly criticized its slaughter of so many Palestinian civilians, its destruction of schools and hospitals, its war crimes generally. And this caught the attention of some right-wing and some pro-Israel groups who pressured the University of Illinois to terminate my contract and to terminate my tenured position. And in U.S. Academic institutions, a tenured position is a guaranteed position. It violates all of the norms of academic freedom and free speech in the United States to do this sort of thing, but they did it anyway. They did it in contravention of the First Amendment and the university's own bylaws. And so what we had at the University of Illinois was outside donors, pro-Israel donors, who told the university that they would stop giving contributions to the school if they went ahead with my appointment. And so I was summarily fired or terminated. And now, more than 4 months later, I'm still out of work.
Right. Did you work on getting back to Virginia Tech, or you just pursuing any kind of action to try and come back to the University of Illinois?
My goal is to be reinstated at the University of Illinois, which I had signed a contract with already. I had already resigned a tenured position in the English department at Virginia Tech, and so that process had already been resolved. And of course, it was the offer and the contract of a tenured position at the University of Illinois that induced me to resign from Virginia Tech in the first place. So moving forward, I'm hoping to I'm hoping to join my colleagues in the American Indian Studies program at Illinois.
Dr. Salaita, your critics actually, they portrayed you as, quote, a raging, violent, incompetent anti-Semite who has no place in a college classroom, and this is in connection with your criticism of the Israeli war, the Israeli aggression against Gaza. University of Illinois President Robert Easter also said, quote, we believe that our classrooms ought to be a place where opinions, regardless of their origin or their perspective, ought to be able to be offered freely and students not feel intimidated or unable to express their opinion, and that's what led us to this decision. Is this really the case, Stephen? Or is there something that lies beneath? I mean, what are the factors that actually led to your firing?
Yeah, this is not the case. The university is trying to sound way more humane than it actually is. The fact of the matter is, the university doesn't seem to care about the comfort or the safety of Palestinian and Arab and Muslim students in its classes. And the fact of the matter is, I have a very long teaching history in U.S. universities, and I've never had these sorts of complaints lodged against me. So they're simply making things up and making assumptions. And also the portrayal of me as bloodthirsty and anti-Semitic and violent and all of these sorts of things are common charges made against anybody in the United States who dares to criticize Israel, and that's particularly true of critics who are of some sort of Middle Eastern or Islamic origin, that the criticism of Israel in itself becomes an act of violence, and this is why we get burdened with these kinds of stereotypes. But I've never committed an act of violence in my life. I'm not disrespectful to people. What I am is a critic of the state of Israel, and in many communities in the United States, that in and of itself is considered a crime.
Right. Now, since you have already signed a contract with the University of Illinois, you also filed a lawsuit. Now, on what basis is this lawsuit that you have filed, and what do you expect out of this lawsuit?
Well, the lawsuit I filed is for what we call a FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act request. The University of Illinois it's a government institution, a public institution, and so the university has an obligation to release its internal documents, email communications, and these sorts of things based on a request from the public, and it's required by law to do it if it's an issue of serious public interest. And this is an issue, of course, of serious public interest, particularly for the taxpayers of the state of Illinois. And so the university thus far has refused to accommodate my request for a release of the documents, and so I've had to sue the university to get hold of those documents. And I'm optimistic that these communications will come to the surface and perhaps cast light on the processes that went into the university's decision.
Where are you now with the case, Dr. Salaita?
We're still waiting for the university to comply with the Freedom of Information request, and we're very close, I think, to filing a formal complaint. But I best leave that sort of discussion to my attorneys.
But, sir, the Board of Trustees, it seems that they have taken this matter into consideration and are working on the consequences of this, and they have even considered losing the case against you. Carrie Nelson, professor of English at the University of Illinois, who was so much consistent with the decision of the Chancellor, Dr. Phyllis Wise, said that a settlement of $1 million would not be unreasonable. So it seems that they have given up on you.
Well, I mean, Carrie Nelson is not a lawyer, but he pretends that he's one, just like Carrie Nelson knows nothing about Palestine, and he pretends he's an expert on the Middle East. So, I mean, there are a lot of different possible outcomes to any litigation that might happen, but I don't think anybody is in doubt or anybody questions the basic fact that the university broke the law and in some way has to be held accountable for that.
Right. Now, allow me here to read one of your tweets. You said, quote, "Only Israel can murder around 300 children in the span of a few weeks and insist that it is the victim." Another tweet read, "It's quite simple, really. Don't support any ideology whose practice results in dead children." And, these are some of the comments that the University of Illinois deemed offensive before sacking you, Dr. Salaita. Now, your tweets were also described by the UIUC, which is the University of Illinois, as uncivil and were a form of disrespectful and demeaning speech that promotes malice, though the Supreme Court has ruled in 2011 that debate on public issues should be robust, uninhibited, and wide open, and is protected even if it inflicts great pain. So this is in direct breach and violation of your First Amendment rights.
It absolutely is, and it's in violation of the university's stated commitment to academic freedom. And in the U.S. context, academic freedom simply means that we are allowed to express viewpoints and we're allowed to conduct research without recrimination from university administrators or without essentially being fired for points of view or for beliefs that challenge conventional wisdom. And the university's invocation of incivility is deeply problematic for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons that it's problematic is because that's the discourse, that's the language that was used to justify and rationalize the colonization of North America. The notion that the native peoples were uncivilized, and this, of course, is the sort of discourse that we hear from Israel and have for many years. The idea that the Palestinians are uncivilized, that they're savage, that they're barbaric. So it really draws from the language of colonization, which is precisely the problem. And again, I go back to the reality that what they're reacting against is not my tone or my language or my my social media activity. What they're really upset about is the fact that I criticized Israel.
Right, Dr. Salaita, allow us to stop now for a short break, and then after the break we're going to talk a bit more about the fine line between personal messages on the social media and public statements. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. اللجنة الأميركية لأساتذة الجامعات وفي بيان مبادئ عام 1940 بخصوص الحرية الأكاديمية والمناصب الأكاديمية الخاصة بأعضاء هيئة التدريس قالت التالي: عندما يتحدثون أو يكتبون كمواطنين فإن عليهم أن يتمتعوا بالحرية بعيدا من الرقابة المؤسسية أو التأديب. الباحث الأمريكي المتخصص في الدراسات الأمريكية الهندية البروفيسور ستيفين سلايطة كيف يرسم الحد الفاصل بين التأكيدات الشخصية على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي والتصريحات العامة والمعرفة المنشورة.
Yeah, the AAUP, the organization that you cite, makes a distinction between what they call an extramural utterance, which is maybe an essay that you write for the newspaper, or these days a tweet or a Facebook post in scholarship. But both of them are protected under the conditions of academic freedom. So there's no standing to fire somebody from a tenured position based on a tweet.
Right. Now, your case, Dr. Salaita, is not, it's only the latest one in a series of many such cases of, revoking contracts with professors and academics at certain universities due to certain kind of pressures, outside pressures from the Israel lobby and from other donors and so on and so forth. Attempt to silence and muzzle opinion in the academic world and in the public arena. Now, recent examples include an attempt by a right-wing organization named AMCHA, which published a blacklist of Middle Eastern scholars who called for the boycott of Israel. This attempt to silence is once again done in the name of, trying to combat anti-Semitism and protecting Jewish students on campus. Now, is this the price that you pay because you are a great advocate of the BDS movement?
I think that probably has a lot to do with it. They're going after people who are active in the BDS movement. They have been for some time. I'm glad that you mentioned the AMCHA initiative, because that's only one of many organizations that exist to put pressure on college administrators to punish faculty who speak in support of Palestine or who speak in criticism, even in mild ways, of Israel. And this goes back a long time. We have dozens of examples of professors in American universities being pressured, being fired, not receiving tenure, all because of the criticism of Israel. And in my case, for example, the very powerful group, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, appears to have been involved. And so you have organizations in the U.S. Whose primary function is to shield or protect Israel from criticism, and who go after in very aggressive ways in some cases academics who were more critical of Israeli policy than they would prefer, and they have the ear of administrators, and they have also the participation of large and important donors, and universities these days listen to what donors tell them, because in the U.S. in public universities state appropriations have shrunk. And so there's very little public funding of universities, and so universities rely more and more on the private sector, and in turn they're exactly.
Right. Now, allow me to go back to the subject, your subject of expertise, which is the American Indian Studies. On December 26th, it is the anniversary of the Dakota 38, or the largest mass execution by the U.S. government of the 38 Native Americans back in 1862. 38 out of 303. The others were left to be tortured and suffering at concentration camps for a year. What was the background, Dr. Salaita, for this largest mass execution in American history?
Yeah, it comes out of basically fighters in the Dakota Wars. So this is fighting between the U.S. government and various native nations on the upper plains of the U.S., Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, sort of this area of the country. And the execution was ordered by Abraham Lincoln, actually, who's considered one of the most, if not the most, progressive U.S. presidents. And it's a part of his record and his history that rarely gets discussed alongside him, which shows just how easy it is for people to forget the violence that the U.S. has inflicted and in many ways continues to inflict against its indigenous population. So 38 people were hanged, and it was a summary hanging. In other words, there was no proper trial or due process. It was done by fiat of executive order, and it's something that our history books don't talk about. There was recently a big Hollywood movie made about Abraham Lincoln, and this execution of 38 people didn't even factor into it.
And it seems here that also Minnesota Governor Alexander Ramsey had declared on September 9th, 1862, that the Sioux Indians of Minnesota must be exterminated or driven forever beyond the borders of the state. It's not only the 38, but also all the others. Now, why did he, Mr. Ramsey, set out on exterminating the native Indians, the Native Americans?
For the same reasons, in lots of ways, that Israel, the Zionists in the early days wanted to expel the Palestinians, and the way that the Zionists now on the West Bank and inside of Israel want to expel the Palestinians. They want the land. They want the resources that come along with that land. They wanted the political power that accrues from taking control of a large land base, and also they saw the Lakota, the native peoples, and mass ethnic cleansing happened all over North America, by the way. But they saw them as a threat to their very existence and to their way of life. So actually look at a lot of the rationales that Israel uses for displacing Palestinians, both in the past and present. You'll see that a lot of those rationales already played out in different ways on the North American continent.
Actually, Dr. Salaita, in your book, The Holy Land in Transit, Colonialism and the Quest for Canaan, you actually try to draw parallels between the Zionist settlement of Palestine and the colonial conquest of the New World and the consequent displacement of the indigenous peoples. Can you elaborate more on the parallels, and can you tell us about what did you exactly examine while drawing these parallels?
Yeah, mostly I examined the language of colonialism. In other words, what the colonizers and the politicians were saying to justify their settlement of another people's land, right? And what they were saying to rationalize their mistreatment of native populations, of indigenous populations. And I found that both of them, both groups of colonists in both North America and Palestine really relied on a notion that they were acting on orders from God, that there was something divine or something destined about their colonial projects, and that the American Indians and the Palestinians were simply an inconvenience to this grander project, and so they either needed to be converted or removed or assimilated or whatever the case may be, but they were in the way of a plan that was much bigger than just the colonizer's psyche, right? They were in the way of a divine project. In the U.S., of course, we call it manifest destiny, right? The idea that we're fulfilling a mission much grander than the individual. And of course, we see that same sort of discourse happening. When all you have to do is listen to a settler from the West Bank to get a sense that he feels like he's acting on orders from above and not just on some sort of human instinct. And the same thing happened in different ways in North America. That's one reason that a lot of Americans identify so deeply, I think, with Israel, because Israel is performing a type of settlement that looks and sounds very familiar to Americans.
Right. You always attempt through also your book and research to drive the parallels or draw the parallels between the U.S. colonial history in comparison with today's Israeli expansionist policies. But one last question, if I may, Dr. Salaita, in anti-Arab racism in the USA, where it comes from and what it means for politics, one of your reviewers said, quote, Salaita dives headfirst into the heart of racism in America and uses his personal experiences to help readers understand the mechanics of racism as it applies to Arabs, Muslims, and people who look Middle Eastern in the post-September 11 world. Now, today, is the fabric of your society, Dr. Salaita, torn apart by racism? Quickly, if I may ask.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the racism in the U.S. towards Arabs and Muslims in lots of ways underlies the U.S.'s imperial policy in parts of the Arab and Islamic world. It's the sense that Arabs lag behind Americans in intellect and in civilizational abilities, which is one reason that the Illinois' invocation of civility is so troublesome. Having grown up in the U.S. to parents, to immigrants from the Arab world, I learned firsthand that there's a sense in which Americans can be defined as modern and civilized in part in contradistinction to the figure of the Arab or the Muslim who is backward, who is barbaric, and who is less capable of acting in a proper way than her Western counterpart.
Yes, and also not to forget today the case of Ferguson, which is just taking a toll, and people are trying to see that racism has never stopped in the U.S. Arab American scholar and expert in American Indian studies from Washington D.C., Dr. Stephen Salaita. Many thanks indeed for joining us.
It was an honor. Thank you.
You're most welcome, sir. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@almayadeen.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل وللتغريد على تويتر. من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.